Welcome to The Secrets of Success. By following the proven techniques of the guests who appear on this series, you'll learn that even successful people run into detours and failures, and how you can apply their success techniques to change your life.
You're now listening to the most unique show on radio, the show dedicated to making you a success. Can anxiety be your superpower? We'll find out today from our guest, Morra Aarons-Mele. Morra, thanks for being with us today.
Great to be here.
Now, Morra, anxiety, that's a term we hear a lot, but to me, I've always kind of analogized it to be the same as stress or worry or nervousness. So am I wrong, or are they all the same or different?
We use them interchangeably, but they are different. Anxiety is an emotion, and it is basically the state of not living in the present. It's living in the future often, right? So we're thinking about what might happen in the future, whether that's 5 minutes or 50 years, and we're worried about it, right? We feel worry, we feel anxiety, or something from the past is coming up and making us anxious. And so anxiety is very much a state of arousal, right? It is the body trying to respond to a threat, but that threat may or may not be real. Whereas stress is usually externally placed on us, as is worry, and they're short term, right? I might feel stressed because my boss just told me to work late the night before Thanksgiving, and all of a sudden I have to plan to stay at the office and I won't be able to cook. I might feel worried for a few minutes before something happens, but anxiety is a sense that usually stays with us, that things are just not okay, and we feel it in our brain and in our body.
Would that be the situation where the boss says, before you come in to go home today, stop into my office and I want to talk to you about something. And all day long we worry about it. And then he or she says, oh, I just wanted to remind you that we're getting a new vending machine in tomorrow or something. And we were sweating it out thinking it was our report wasn't good or we got a bad rating or something. And I guess we imagined it. And
it's imagined. And worrying is actually what we do when we feel anxious, right? So it's actually a behavior that happens when that anxiety is triggered by the thought of, oh my God, is my boss firing me?
Can some people be just anxious by nature? Are we all the same in that category? Or just like different skills? Some are good dancers, some are good hitting a ping pong ball.
Yeah, everyone's different. Anxiety is a universal emotion. And so everyone feels anxiety, but the state of being anxious is something that we all experience. The trait of being anxious, right, is something that some of us are born with. It may be chemical, it may be biological, it may stem from past experiences in our childhood or even trauma, or maybe we're just wired that way, But a lot of us exist in an anxious way, even when we don't need to be, because that's just how we roll. And then sometimes we get anxiety disorders, right? Which is when anxiety becomes a mental illness. So anxiety kind of exists on a spectrum. And when you're at the very low end of the spectrum is when your anxiety is getting in the way of you living your life. And that's called an anxiety disorder. And that's when you really, really need to get some professional help.
Now, when I was thinking of it and we going through your book and planning the show, I thought, well, nobody wants anxiety. We'd like things to be calm. But then I thought, suppose we could, get any 3 wishes we want. We had the magic genie. I said, let's get rid of anxiety. And then I would sit out by a lake all day and look at the flat water not moving and nothing happening. And the biggest change all day would be the sun comes up and the sun goes down. And boy, I would be bored by about 8:15 in the morning. Boring, exactly. So I guess there is a good level of anxiety. And then when it gets like anything else, too much, like we're overweight, a little bit is okay. But if we are hitting 500-600 pounds, that's a problem.
Yeah, I think the thing about anxiety is that we need it. Dr. David Barlow, who's been a leading anxiety researcher for decades, has said that without anxiety, nothing would happen, right? Fundamentally, we wouldn't harvest the crops because winter was coming, right? He says we would have no great athletes, no great art, no business ideas. We wouldn't have any innovation. Anxiety really motivates us a lot of times. And so that's really, really important because anxiety really gets our body ready to go, right? It gets us into fight or flight And so we need anxiety. And, say you are about to give a speech that you've been working on and you really care about it. Most people are anxious about that, right? They've put a lot of investment into it. They want it to go well, and they're anxious. And that's good, right? That is the kind of anxiety that's going to give your body that extra oomph to really deliver on stage. But when you're always feeling anxious, right? When it's just chronic and you can't escape it and your brain never stops swirling and your body is tight and your chest is tight and your breath is shallow, that's also no way to live either. And so there has to be a middle ground. And that's really what my book is about, is learning how to manage your anxiety, also control how you respond when you're anxious.
And that seems obviously a good point. Like anything else, too much of anything. We like ice cream, but like the little kid, you work in the ice cream store for a day or two and you've had enough of it because now it's free and you just have it all the time. I was surprised to see that anxiety is actually if I have this correct from your book, the world's most common mental health problem. Did I get that correct?
Yeah. Why does that surprise you?
I guess I just never thought of that as a mental health problem. I thought of, kind of like a small discomfort. What would you call it? A pimple or a bruise or something. I guess technically those things are medical situations, but I wouldn't put them in with a broken wrist or a heart attack or broken bones or something.
Well, right. And here's where it's important to remember the idea that anxiety is on a spectrum. So neuroscientists call the top of the spectrum that good anxiety, right? That's the anxiety that I might feel temporarily. It's usually time delimited. It's about a state or a situation, and then it goes away. And in the middle is maybe some chronic anxiety that a lot of us feel, right? When things are uncertain or the world feels scary, and it's weighing us down and it's bothering us, but we're able to manage, right? We're living our lives. We're not avoiding things. We're able to function. Anxiety becomes a mental disorder when it gets in the way of our functioning, when it's really not working for us. And that is the world's most common mental health disorder. It makes perfect sense to me because our human condition is really wired for anxiety. Now, but it can also get to be too much.
Now, you probably have the perfect topic for the perfect time because, and of course, we all kind of know this in the background, but virtually every guest we have on talks about certainly the world we live in today with cell phones, emails, texts. We're on kind of a 24-hour call, and sometimes I'm on the golf course and just playing casual golf with friends, and as I'm walking to the next hole, which is 300-400 yards, I can hear the phone beeping. And then in my mind, I'm saying, why is it beeping? Is that an emergency? Does that mean a relative is sick or passed away? Is it my pharmacy telling me my prescription's ready? Or is it my wife saying, pick up 2 hamburgers on the way home? Obviously, it could be any of those, but right away I'm thinking the worst, like, oh, I hope it's not this, whatever it is that I'm worried about.
That's anxiety.
Yeah. But I would think because of all this equipment we have, the access to information, the 24-hour-a-day being on the job type of thing, I would think your subject is even highlighted even more now and maybe moving up in terms of, not that it's a good thing, but in that more and more people are becoming aware of it and suffering. Is that the case?
I mean, more and more people are becoming aware of it for sure. And, I focus on the workplace and on leadership. And of course, it's something that we talk about. We talk about our mental health now at work. The pandemic really gave a kick in the pants to a lot of issues that had been, growing in awareness, but the pandemic laid it all bare. I think, though, that one of the things that I want to say about anxiety is that we can't avoid it. We can manage it. And that it's not always bad. Anxiety is something that we don't like talking about. We don't like thinking about it. We are embarrassed to admit that we have it often. Certainly if we're in charge of things, right? Oh God, people might think I'm weak. They might not think I'm up to the task. And that's not true at all. Anxiety is a very natural, common part of life. When you're a leader, you deal with a lot more anxiety, both your own and other people's. And it's really important to pay attention to it and learn to manage it, right? We can't run away from it. And that's something I want people to really think about.
Morra, before we continue, I'd like our audience to know that you're listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm your host, Bill Horan. Our guest today is Morra Aarons-Mele. She is the author of The Anxious Achiever, Turn Your Biggest Fears into Your Leadership Superpower. And Morra, can you tell us if there's a website where we can learn more?
Sure. Well, first of all, if you're on LinkedIn, you can find me there. Send me a message. I'll write you back. I'm very active on LinkedIn. And you can find me at morraam.com, MORRAAM.com.
And we'll ask you that again, so if someone didn't get it down, they have plenty of time to get that pencil and paper handy. Now, it's interesting as I was going through your book that you're writing a book on anxiety because you're kind of like the busiest person in the world. And you're a mom. You have children. You have a podcast. You obviously wrote this book. You advise presidents on things. You have your own consulting company. You probably have 20 other things I didn't get to yet in the book because I'm getting anxious just listing those and saying, wait, where do you even get the time to sleep? So is that why you wrote the book? Did it reflect some of the things you were going through?
I'm an anxious achiever. So I am driven in large part by anxiety. And in large part because I want to make a mark on the world and do good and raise my children and have a big life. But it really hit me when I was younger that my natural anxiety, I've been anxious ever since I was 3 years old, and I got diagnosed with clinical anxiety when I was 19. I also have bipolar 2 disorder, was really something that sometimes got me down and sometimes stopped me from doing things, but often got me going, really led me to push. You know, I was a kid, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners can relate, where I really sought out that gold star. You know, I really craved external validation. It was somehow drummed into me that I had to always try to be special and always try to be the best. And I felt like that was my self-worth, you know, that anxious sense of, if this isn't good enough, what does that say about me? Really drove me, and it drives me to this day. Sometimes, you know, I wake up in the morning and I am just full of worry, and I have learned to channel that worry into action. And there's a lot of people like me who feel that anxiety is almost our oxygen, but we rely on it to keep us striving and going. And that can be okay for a while, but at some point, we burn out. At some point, it gets to be too much. And so the question that I always pose to people is your anxious achievement, is your anxiety working for you? Or is it time to learn a more balanced way to be, so that you can't get rid of that anxiety? It might be part of you. Learn to manage it, learn to channel it, learn to use it, and then learn to tell it to go away when it really doesn't belong and it's just dragging you down.
And it's funny, you're talking about anxiety, and as I'm listening to you, you have the most calming, easy voice that if even if you had to give me bad news and say, Bill, I'm sorry to tell you your car has been stolen and you lost your job. Well, okay, well, thank you. You've said it so nicely, it's really not going to bother me. So you do come across as the most relaxed, a professional, competent person, and yet you're saying you're suffering from it, and at least you're aware of it and know how to, I guess, get a better control, or maybe, to use your term, manage it better. Would that be correct?
To manage it. Yeah, absolutely. I am. I'm all the things. You know, I often talk about the fact that, you know, I, like many people who have a mental illness, I am someone who has at times not been able to leave my bed, and who has suffered and who has had to seek all kinds of intense and expensive and psychiatric treatments. And I am also someone who has advised presidential campaigns and who has won global awards and who has 3 kids and is mostly happy. I am both of those things. And, you know, that's the magic, because a lot of us are so scared of our emotions, especially big ones like anxiety or anger, right? That we avoid them, or we drink, or we overwork, or we kick the dog. But when we get in touch with them and we learn how to listen to them and manage them, that's when we really get a leadership superpower, right? We are self-aware, we are empathetic, and we are ultimately much more in touch.
Now, we're talking about, of course, the subject of anxiety, but I think someone would say kind of easily to me, oh, I have a headache, or I have a broken arm, or I threw my back out last week. I don't recall too many people saying I'm anxious. And you brought this out in your book, or I'm suffering from anxiety today. I'm worried about a project. Is anxiety almost a no-no to talk about because it's a sign of weakness, especially if we're in a profession where I'll use the example of the football player, that big, mean, tough football player who's knocking over 300-pound other football players with a different uniform on, or a policeman who, is going to be under pressure all day and at any time may have to make a life or death decision. So is that something we don't want to admit to because it makes us seem like we might be on the weak side of the spectrum?
There is a sense that admitting, right, anxiety, admitting fear, admitting worry will be construed as a lack of strength, a lack of leadership. But that football player can be as anxious as anyone. That cop needs to be anxious, right? Because her life could be at stake and she has to basically think about patterns, right? A lot of anxiety is pattern matching. It evolved as a way to say, oh, that rustle in the bushes might mean that there's a predator. So if I hear that rustle in the bushes, right, my heart rate goes up. I go into flight or fight. And so anxiety was meant to keep us aware and keep us away from threats. But the key is that football player or that police person who has learned to manage anxiety, right, is way better off than someone who won't admit it, right, who just isn't in touch, who can't name it, because the anxiety has to go somewhere. And oftentimes it's really uncomfortable to feel. And so we can act out. A cop who says, I'm anxious and there's a reason for that, and I'm going to make a plan so that I can stay safe, is way better off.
You point out, and I love the way you put this, you say, ask anxiety, what are you trying to tell me? Mm-hmm. And the more you think about that statement, it's probably says it all, but I'd like you to explain it.
Anxiety is trying to tell us something, right? It's our nervous system. It's our nervous system saying, we feel like something's wrong. Now, that's not always true. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's feeling that way because of a past experience that's no longer relevant. And you can say, you know what? That happened before, but it's not going to happen again. So no, thank you. And sometimes your anxiety is telling you, I care about this. There's a lot on the line here. I really need to give this my best. Sometimes it's telling you, something is wrong. Either I don't feel safe or my boundaries have been crossed, or God, my boss is really a jerk. I'm really anxious before I meet with them because they shame me and they are cruel to me and this isn't good. And sometimes it's telling us that we want to do something different. It's telling you something. It's almost like the National Weather Service, right? With the radar in a hurricane. Our emotions are there for a reason. And it's up to us to learn how to decipher them and then figure out what we want to do with them.
And I like the way you put it. The book is about making conscious something that's currently unconscious. So I guess we know we're showing anxiety. Our family sees it in us. And yet I think what you're telling us is kind of take a look back. Is it that person we're dating that it's not a good match? Is it the job we're going to every day because we want to be that super accountant? And maybe it's not for us. We would be a much better teacher or writer or maybe a totally different field. So am I getting the right idea by that?
Yeah, I think it's really opening up a process of inquiry that can be really helpful. And, we talk about a gut feeling. Well, that's true. Our gut is tuned into our nervous system. And so, again, we feel emotions for a reason. We don't have to act on them. Just because I feel anxious before a flight doesn't mean I'm not going to take that flight. If I have to go somewhere for business and I have bad flight anxiety, it brings all of my fears up, I can say to it, you know what? You're anxious, Morra. You're always anxious before a flight, but you've flown hundreds of times. It's always been okay. You need to go to this conference. You're feeling anxious, but it's just a feeling, right? The wonderful therapy saying feelings aren't facts. That's really true. And so when we're able to have a dialogue with it, it's suddenly a lot less scary.
It definitely is. Now, I want to find out more because I'm fascinated by this. But once again, we want our audience to know, if you're just tuning in, you're listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Bill Horan. Our guest today is Morra Aarons-Mele. She is the author of The Anxious Achiever. And Morra, we're going to ask you once again, is there a website where we can find out more information?
Yep, absolutely. My website is www.morraam.com, morraam.com, or you can come find me on LinkedIn, where I'm very active and would love to connect.
And obviously, I think you can see that all of us suffer from this in some way or other. And maybe to hear some of the ideas that Morra has, you might say, that's what I've been looking for. Or in a sense, it's Morra giving you permission to either change something, react to it, or do something different that maybe you've been wanting to for years, but just wanted an expert like Morra to say, it's okay, there's nothing wrong doing that. Now,
yeah,
no, go ahead.
I was just going to say there's a wonderful professor and psychologist at Yale, Dr. Mark Brackett, and his book is called Permission to Feel. And, I think that that's really a piece of this. Those of us who were raised to achieve or to be good girls or excellent men or, blah, 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 weren't always given permission to feel. And it's a necessary thing if you want to really become the human and the leader that you were meant to be. You can't shut off such an important piece of yourself, right? And so that's a lot of the work that I do, is just helping leaders tune in, giving them the ability to start paying attention to what their body is telling them and what their emotions are telling them.
And I really think that's so great. And by having someone just say it, it just brings it out. Like sometimes you see that poster that has a saying for today and you say, that's the way I'm going to lead my life. Now, You mentioned leaders. And of course, I would think people like this, like yourself, I mean, you're the mom of 3 children. You've got the podcast. You've got your consulting business. You're doing things all the time. That's a very active life. And it's got to be tense in some situations because you have so many things going on. And obviously, there's many other leaders out there who are going to have multiple effects of that. You say it's a superpower, though. So how does that become a superpower? Because isn't that maybe causing us to move in a negative direction or not giving enough time to either the children, the book, the next project, or the consulting?
The superpower is what you gain when you learn to tackle and manage those emotions, right? When you bring into consciousness what is unconscious, that's the superpower, right? Every manager is told 2 things. They should be able to create a psychologically safe environment at work where people feel like they can be themselves and throw around ideas without fear of being shamed or cut out. And they're told that people who work with them value a leader who is self-aware enough to not act out their SHIT onto the team, right? Who's a good manager, who can balance the emotions of the team and the needs of the team with the needs of the business, right? That takes a lot of self-awareness. And this is the superpower, because most managers, most leaders, we're not raised to do these things, right? We're not raised to think about how someone might feel in a setting where there are layoffs in the company and I have to deliver news, or I'm showing up every day and worrying about, oh my God, are the layoffs going to hit my team next, right? That takes an incredible amount of self-knowledge and awareness. And when you go through the work of understanding your emotions, and specifically anxiety, because we all feel it, and it has profound effects on how we show up at work and what happens at work and how we treat people, we become much better leaders, right?
Now, that's obviously true, but now let's make you the leader of the company, and which you are, and the person above you says you have to cut 30 employees in your section. And, you're upset for the obvious reasons that you mentioned. And then as you do that, 3 of them make it known to you that you've ruined their lives. And you can see they're a little bit in the dangerous side because they may be waiting in the parking lot or sending you an envelope with a little white powder in it or whatever people do to vent their feelings. This is causing you anxiety. And
yes.
you're in the middle of it. Your boss has told you you're not the bad person, but they have to take it out on someone. And yet this is what you do. You are a leader, and whatever that's called in that division, foreman, district leader, commander, district rep or regional rep, et cetera, et cetera. What do you advise people? Should they start reviewing their career? Should they make change? Seriously.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is to say to yourself, "Oh my God, I'm anxious, I'm scared, I'm angry." Like, you're having big emotions because something big is happening. And I think that, one of the things that we learn to do, sometimes even as parents, you might learn it in therapy, you might learn it in coaching, you might learn it through friends, is to set boundaries, right? And this is really important for leaders to do. And it takes practice and it takes skill and emotional fluency, right? Is the ability to say, this sucks. I'm really anxious. I'm nervous for my own future. I'm nervous for my own career. I'm anxious about my employees. Now they expect me to fix everything for them. I can't. And my manager wants me to solve all their problems for them, right? I hear this all the time from managers. They feel stuck in the middle. They're just absorbing everyone else's anxieties and everyone else's emotions. And that is really, really hard to do. And that's why I wish that every company would offer coaching and a psychologist on site to help people understand that, right? I can't fix everyone. I need to acknowledge how I feel. I need to take care of myself, and I need to do the best I can for people without taking on all of their feelings.
I think
right?
more and more we need that today, and I think you have the perfect book for the perfect time, The Anxious Achiever by our guest Morra, and it's a hyphenated last name, Aarons, Aarons -Mele, Mele. Morra, please give us that website one more time.
It's morraam.com, MORRAAM.com, or find me on LinkedIn.
Morra, thank you for being with us today, and we really learned a lot about anxiety, and we appreciate it.
Thanks, Bill.
I'd like our audience to know you've been listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm your host, Bill Horan, asking you to please join us again next week at the same time when we will continue our journey to success.